I'm going to talk about something today that's a little bit controversial because I am not an accountant. I do not play one on TV. This is not coming from an accounting point of view. This is coming purely from a coach point of view. You and your accountant are fully responsible how you manage what you're doing with your financials. But that being said, I think the way we manage our financials in our businesses are often indicative of how honest we are with ourselves sometimes. And so today I want to talk about something that I see in many business owners that I work with. And it's subtle and it seems like, why are you dealing with that? But I think it is going to be really important to talk about and to share with you a perspective that you may not have thought about before. And it is this. As an owner, I believe it's critical that you pay yourself a market-based wage. And by that, I mean you are legitimately paying yourself a paycheck for what somebody else of your value and capability would be being paid in the same position you hold, like you would pay any employee, but you pay yourself a market-based wage. I got to give a lot of credit on this one to Greg Crabtree. His books, his webinars, his lessons, again, have been extraordinarily helpful, and I am channeling Greg. So again, I'm not an accountant. Greg is. I am only taking what I've learned from him to teach you some stuff, but I have tried to use this in my business. I've talked with many of my coaching clients about this. And if you haven't had this talked about before, it's really helpful. So your approach to your own salary and your distributions, depending on the structure of your business, and most small business owners are either an LLC or an S Corp. And the way that most people in the business tend to operate is you pay yourself a salary and you take distributions. And a lot of times what begins to happen is, depending on how you structure that arrangement for yourself, not for anybody else in the company, but for yourself, or if there's partners in the business, how you structure that for you as partners in the business is often clouding your view of net income. It's giving you a funky view of it, and I want to talk a little bit about that today. So here's how a lot of owners who have S Corps, LLCs tend to deal with this. Is there's this belief that if I pay myself a lower salary, I then will make my income by living on distributions, and in doing that, I kind of beat the tax. Right? So there's this game that we start to play. So I lower my salary, I take most of my income as distribution because I have this belief that it somehow is better for me because I don't pay as much tax. And while tax management is an important part of the whole game we play as business owners, the problem with that process, I believe, is you're lying to yourself because your financial data is now suspect. Your financial numbers that you tend to get excited about are suspect, right? Because our revenue minus our cost of sale gives us a gross profit. Our operating expenses plus our reduced salary tends to give us this really nice pre-tax profit. And I have clients that I've worked with who have lovely pre-tax profits, and they're quite proud of those pre-tax profits until I raise this issue, until I raise the impact of a reduced salary, a salary that complies with, if I just reduce and I pay myself distributions. And you go, well, does it really matter? I mean, it's all coming from the same pie. It's all coming from the same pot. It's better for taxes, all of that. The problem is that it's kind of like if you're with a compass and you've got a compass and you're heading somewhere, but you're just 5% off. And over time, that 5% has dramatic impact on your business. And I believe this is one of those things in your business that can really start to, get you off course if you don't recognize it and don't understand it. So some sort of baseline philosophy that I believe that is really important for you to understand. Salary is based on the role you play in the business. You're paid a salary for what you do. You're paid a distribution based on what you own of the business related to your shares. So if you're partners, at the end of the day, the profit, typically in an S Corp or an LLC, and if you're not in the US and you're in Canada or you're in other countries, how the tax burden is really managed is what happens after the profit occurs, right? So depending on the structure where you are, distribution is what you get because you own shares of a business. Salary is what you get for the role or the accountabilities or the actual job that you do. And so often if you miss this point, right, you're acting out of sort with what I believe are fundamental principles. And so the way to sort of offset that is the primary thing: pay yourself a market-based wage. Pay yourself what you're worth in the marketplace. And a lot of times we go, well, that's not right. And I go, well, why isn't it right? Why wouldn't it be right to do that? Well, my accountant tends to like this or something else. And again, you can deal with your accountant, do it however you think to do it. But I believe there's something really powerful in paying yourself a market-based wage. So here's how I tend to think about it. So let's assume, and I know this is kind of a gross, kind of a weird thing, but you get hit by a bus. And in getting hit by a bus, as the owner of that business and running the particular roles you do, let's say your heirs decide that the business is worth keeping as a way to support their lives. Because to get rid of it, it's probably not going to be easy, but to keep it would probably support the life they have. And so if you got hit by a bus and your heirs needed to replace you with somebody who had your equivalent capabilities but had zero ownership in the business, remember, your shares have passed to your heirs, and now all that is there is somebody to be paid to run the business. What salary would you have to pay that person to replace you? And there's a whole bunch of formulas for that, and there's lots of ways to find that information. Salary.com, a lot of times in smaller businesses, as an owner or as partners, you play a whole bunch of different roles, but you can sort of dissect and deconstruct all the things you're doing and go, if I had to replace myself, what would I have to pay? And that then begins to give you a sense of a market-based salary. And I'm not suggesting you necessarily have to go crazy out of this world or go too low. The tendency is a lot of people think they pay themselves well, but they don't pay themselves a market-based salary, and they underpay themselves and live off the dividends. And so as a result of that, you now know the number. And so how I tend to think about it is, if you look at your P&L and you have a legitimate discounted salary in there, so you're not paying yourself salary rate, what you tend to have at the end of the day, even if your profit looks good, you tend to have a sick business. Like that's this thing here, that's meant to look like a virus. It's an attempt. It's just what Apple had in its toolkit for me, but it's a sick business. You end up having kind of a sick business because you're not paying yourself enough unless your profit looks good. So there's a little element of ego tied up in this. We love to say how much profit our business makes, but unless you can redistribute yourself, and if your business can't make profit, if you actually pay yourself a market-based wage, something's wrong with the business. There's a sickness to it. The other option is it's too early in your business to actually have the capacity to pay yourself a full wage. So essentially what you're giving yourself is sweat equity. You're investing in the business. What you would be worth to the business is being held in arrears. And I think if you're doing that, if you're not paying yourself a market-based salary, that amount, that discounted amount, should be held in arrears and documented so that at some point it can be repaid as a portion of your overall financial package. But a lot of times we don't do that. We just pay ourselves distributions. We kind of live on the distributions, we pay a reduced rate, and we think we actually have a functioning business, and yet we don't. It's often kind of sick. So I want you to think about it this way. Revenue minus your cost of sales creates your gross profit. I pay myself and everyone else in the business. And so if you have two partners in the business and one partner serves as CEO and the other partner serves as CFO, you should be paid proportional, not equal. You should be paid proportional to what a market rate salary would take to replace you in the business. Added to that, you get all your other operating expense, you get your pre-tax profit. That profit with market-based salaries actually becomes the legitimate one to look at. And if you discover that you aren't making enough money, now you know something's wrong with the business. Something needs to be done to the business to actually make it profitable. So if you went from a 25% profit paying yourself discounted salary, and now you pay yourself market rate salary and you drop to 4% or 3%, now you know something's not right here. There is something funky in the kingdom that you got to figure out and fix. So that's what you begin to work on. So 2 recommendations. I hope you're processing this because I think it's critical to your business. The first one is you need to be a more demanding employee. If you're the owner of a business and you also function in a role as CEO, president, and the different functions that you play in the business, or if you're partners and you function in some kind of partnership together and you're underpaying yourself, you need to be a more demanding employee. And then secondly, if you own the shares of a business or co-own the shares of the business, you need to be a more demanding shareholder. What do I mean by that? If you're an employee who's being paid under market rates, you need to be asking, why am I working for so little? What exactly am I doing this? Because there's an opportunity cost and not just going out and doing it for somebody else where you'd be paid full premium. So unless you have a long-term plan to actually pay yourself market rate to have a legitimate business that has legitimate financials where you're not lying to yourself, you should be asking this question: why should I be working for so little? I should be paying myself what I'm worth in the market. And the business should have to solve, or I, as the functioning executive in the business, need to figure out how the business can make sure I'm paid what I'm worth in the market. So that's number one. Second one is be a more demanding shareholder. If as a owner of shares of a corporation and you know that the profit statements are overstated because the CEO is getting paid less than market rates, you're overstating the profits. And as a shareholder, I will not stand for that. I do not want to stand for profits being stated incorrectly. And so it behooves you as a shareholder in your business to ensure that you're looking at the payment of your CEO and of your executives to ensure they're paying a market-based wage. Otherwise, something's going to happen. We know that if you don't generally stay and stick with most of your employees in your business, if they're not paid relative to a market-based wage, that eventually that's a liability. You're going to lose them. It just happens. And so I think you have to think that way with yourself. Am I paying myself a market-based wage such that I have longevity in this business so that the business is steady and stable, and that I'm accurately reflecting the profit margins in my business? Now, again, not an accountant, not trying to play one, but be careful of the accountant and your own predisposition to only save taxes, right? It's something that happens in a lot of our businesses when we get so focused on saving taxes that we start playing the game between lowering my salary, raising my distributions, and in doing so, what we start to do is get ourselves offline. We start lying to ourselves. We start seeing things in separate ways. And so be a demanding employee, demand that you get paid a market-based salary, and be a demanding shareholder. Demand that your company show accurate profit margin related to paying everyone on staff a market-based wage. That builds stability for your company. And so I know this one feels like it might kind of poke you in a place you don't want to be poked, because it is often a place where I see people kind of getting off track. And in getting off track, because the whole tax focus is so important, it skews your thinking, and it skews the results that you're getting because you think you're more profitable than you actually are. I hope you live with this one. I hope you kind of process this one a little bit, and I hope it helps you to look at your numbers. And if you want to talk about it, I'd love to talk to you about it. Again, not an accountant, but I believe this one means a lot in your business, and it actually has deeper implications than even what I've talked about. And I hope you can find those for yourself. Thanks for being here. We'll talk soon.